Welcome to The Explainer. Let's start with a wild idea. What if you had to design the rules for society, but you had absolutely no idea who you were going to be within it? Today, we're diving into a powerful thought experiment that forces us to look past our own biases and completely rethink what it means to be fair.
So, let's kick off with a huge question, one that philosophers have been wrestling with for centuries. When we're making the rules that we all have to live by, how do we make sure they're not just helping out the powerful or the people in charge, but that they're genuinely fair for every single person?
Well, back in 1971, the philosopher John Rawls came along with a pretty revolutionary answer. In his massive book, A Theory of Justice, he laid out this simple but really profound way of thinking about fairness, not as some kind of compromise, but as the core principle that everything else should be built on.
He called it the veil of ignorance. So imagine this. You get to design a brand new society from scratch. The only catch? You have to do it from behind a veil that completely hides everything about who you'll be in that society. Your money, your race, your gender, your talents, even what you believe in.
The process itself is so simple, it's brilliant. You get the founders together, you strip away their identities with this imaginary veil, and then you ask them to agree on the rules. And since you have no clue if you're going to be rich or poor, powerful or marginalized, you have a really strong reason to make sure the rules are fair for everybody.
And that is the absolute genius of the whole idea. The veil of ignorance forces you to be impartial. By taking your own self-interest completely out of the equation, you're guided to pick principles that protect the most vulnerable people. Because, hey, that could end up being you.
Okay, so that's a super powerful tool for thinking about justice right now. But what happens if we expand the guest list? What if this big meeting wasn't just for everyone alive today, but for everyone who has ever lived and everyone who is still to come?
Yeah, this is what's called the intergenerational veil. In this version of the experiment, you don't just forget who you are, you forget when you are. You could be a medieval farmer, a 21st century software developer, or maybe even a citizen of a Mars colony in the year 2500.
And that one little twist, it changes everything. All of a sudden, you have to create rules that are fair across all of time. You'd want to protect the planet for the future because you might end up living there. You'd respect the sacrifices made in the past because you might have been one of them.
And you see? This perfectly illustrates why big issues like climate change, or using up our natural resources, or even taking on massive public debt, they suddenly become urgent matters of justice, not just boring policy. You're forced to protect the interests of people who don't even exist yet.
Okay, I know this is a massive, pretty abstract concept. So how do we even begin to wrap our heads around it? Well, the key, as it so often is in philosophy, is to use our own imagination.
I mean, think of it like some epic movie. You're putting together this incredible cast with, say, Socrates, a suffragette from the early 20th century, an astronaut, and maybe a representative from the 23rd century, all in a room to write the script for humanity. This isn't just an abstract idea, it's a call to imagine a conversation across all of time.
And you know, this isn't some brand new, out-of-nowhere idea. It actually has echoes of some of the oldest traditions in philosophy. Just like Socrates used dialogues to challenge assumptions and search for universal truths, the intergenerational veil pushes us to look beyond our own moment in time to find universal principles of justice.
This really reframes how we think about, well, thinking. The ideas we're grappling with today aren't just for us. They are a legacy. They are the intellectual tools we're leaving behind for future generations to solve problems we can't even imagine yet.
It's a beautiful concept for sure. But, you know, theory is one thing, and reality is another. How does this grand idea hold up against all the messy complications of the real world?
And look, the problems are significant. I mean, how can we truly speak for future generations when we have no idea what they'll value or what kind of challenges they'll face? And how do we balance our immediate urgent needs right now against their potential far-off ones?
This creates this fundamental tension that really defines so much of our modern world. On one side, you have the very real demands of today, for jobs, for energy, for progress. And on the other, you have the silent but profound rights of the future to inherit a planet that's still livable.
One of the most promising ways to handle this tension is through a concept most of us already know: sustainability. It's really the philosophy behind everything from international climate agreements to those giant sovereign wealth funds countries set up to save resources for the future.
What this really means is that we have to act with caution. When a new technology or a policy comes along that carries a risk of long-term irreversible harm, we have to play it safe. We have to err on the side of protecting the future. It's why some countries are even starting to write the rights of future generations directly into their constitutions.
So, at the end of the day, the intergenerational veil of ignorance isn't just some clever thought experiment. It's a call to action. It asks us to expand our moral circle to include everyone who has ever lived and everyone who is yet to be born.
And that leaves us with one final, vital question to consider. If we truly saw ourselves as links in this great chain of humanity and made our decisions from that perspective, what kind of world would we choose to create?